trafficked into the human sex industry. Human sex trafficking is a modern-day form of slavery, with the International Labor Organization reporting about 4.5 million people enslaved worldwide. Sex trafficking is a heinous hidden crime whose victims often go unidentified or undiscovered. This crime is more portrayed as a reality that solely happens in third world countries. However, it's happening right here in the United States. Sex trafficking didn't seem like a reality to me until I saw a 13-year-old girl on the news from my hometown who had gotten caught in the ring. In fact, the FBI reports that the Mall of America is the 13th largest place in the United States for sex traffickers, and the Department of Justice reported cases of sex trafficking in all 50 states for the year of 2015. Sex trafficking is a domestic and international crisis that needs to be tackled with proper laws and acts put into place to not only punish the perpetrators, but to help the victims and survivors. Sex trafficking doesn't just happen in tiny little villages in Thailand or Cambodia. It happens in Atlanta, Houston, Minneapolis, and everywhere in between. The FBI estimates that there are between 100,000 to 300,000 children and young women trafficked in America today. Exact numbers are hard to procure because the crime mostly goes unreported and unnoticed. For example, despite the numbers being between 100,000 to 300,000, the National Human Trafficking Resource Center reported that there were only 12,508 cases handled for the year of 2015. Moreover, the International Labor Organization estimates that 98% of sex trafficking victims are women and children, both boys and girls. And the average age of someone being sex trafficked, according to the FBI, is only 11. And a study conducted by Dr. J.J. Potterat found that over a span of 30 years, a prostitute's lifespan is only 34. So someone can surmise from that that the life expectancy for a sex trafficking victim is likewise low. And there are several types of trafficking within sex trafficking: familial, pimp-controlled, gang, forced marriage, and survival. In familial trafficking, the victim's controlled by family members who sexually exploit them in exchange for something in return. Like a mom might let her boyfriend abuse her child in return for a place to stay. Pimp-controlled trafficking is when a pimp controls a victim physically, psychologically, and or emotionally. Gang trafficking is when a gang controls a victim, and gangs are turning to this more and more frequently because it's seen as a safer and more lucrative option to drug trafficking. And according to Columbia University in 2007, the average worth of victim was $29,210. And forced marriage is when one or both participants are forced to be married against their will. And survival sex is when a certain person doesn't necessarily feel controlled by the perpetrator, but the victim feels that they need to in order to obtain basic commodities to survive. Victims of sex trafficking are more often than not just regular people. They're the vulnerable 14-year-old girl at the mall approached by an older man. They're the insecure little 13-year-old boy on social media talking to strangers. And they're the 16-year-old girl persuaded by her friends. There's no exact stereotype because sex trafficking can and does happen to anybody, but there are warning signs, like if they're a runaway, if there's child abuse or neglect, etc. And a trafficker can be anyone who's willing to exploit someone in order to get a benefit. So it could be like your family, or someone you meet at the mall, or just really like anybody, because high profits and low risk are two main motivators of this crime that encourage people to do this. And even though there have been several international treaties passed since 2000, the sex trafficking industry is so concealed in nature that it's difficult to regulate. And the absence of specific policies and protocols related to sexual exploitation makes it difficult to identify and count victims in order to help them. And victims and survivors are often really hesitant to seek out law enforcement because in most states they're still treated as criminals instead of being helped as victims. And healthcare providers haven't widely adopted screening for these victims. So the lack of awareness among those who routinely interact with these victims ensures that these crimes are not identified or addressed. Commercial sexual exploitation and sex trafficking of women and children in the United States is frequently overlooked, misunderstood, and an underaddressed domestic issue. And even though there have been efforts and attention placed on this issue within the past decade, it remains mostly on the international scale. This international focus overshadows the reality of the matter that sexual exploitation goes on today in our nation, and a nation that's unaware of this issue unwittingly contributes to the ongoing abuse and ensures that these crimes remain marginalized and misunderstood. Sex trafficking is a concealed crime whose victims far too frequently go unnoticed and unidentified, especially in the United States, because of the focus being shifted on the international sphere. And we as Americans are called to help our fellow citizens who fall victim to these horrific crimes and to put a stop to the vicious, destructive cycle of sexual exploitation. And anyone in any matter can take part in stopping sex trafficking. It just starts with education.